Hello and welcome to 32 Teams in 32 Days. This is a brand spanking new NFL podcast previewing the 2025 offseason, one team at a time. I'm your host, Ben Jackson. It's been interesting working on this podcast so far. I'm really interested to get one uploaded and see how it goes. Now, each day we'll break down a different team, covering everything from roster needs to coaching changes, offseason plans for the draft and free agency. Today, we're starting with the team picking first in the draft, the Tennessee Titans, breaking down everything they need to do to rebuild and bounce back. Let's get after it. All right, so last offseason, this organization decided to make a transition from longtime head coach Mike Vrabel to Brian Callahan. Unfortunately, it kind of bottomed out with a 3-14 record. A big reason for that was quarterback Will Levis struggled as a starting quarterback. He went 2-10, 13 touchdowns, 18 turnovers. That's 12 picks, 6 lost fumbles, and a 12% sack rate. Some of that on the offensive line, almost assuredly. But is all of it? No. He did struggle to process what he was seeing on the field, and all in all, just committed way too many negative plays for the offense to play winning football. By any metric that you want to evaluate, any statistics, be it PFF grade or adjusted net yards per pass attempt, Levis ranked in the bottom 20th percentile. So it's easy to see, that's a big manifestation of the overall struggles of the offense. If you break it down into expected points added per play, EPA per play rankings, the offense was 30th last year. And again, a big reason for that is not only the quarterback play, but just having a bottom 5 offensive line, even after the investments that they've made, which we'll get into. It was a revolving door on that unit. They started 3 different centers, 5 different right tackles. They've got a free agent at right guard. So there's still a lot of work to be done to get that unit up to snuff. On the defensive side of the ball, they were better. I think they've got more talent on that side of the ball pretty clearly. They ranked 20th in EPA per play on the defensive side of the ball under new defensive coordinator Denard Wilson. So looks like things might be going in the right direction there. As a result of the 2024 struggles, several changes were made into the organizational structure. First of all, GM Rand Carthon was fired. Only after a couple years on the job, but it's a tough gig and you got to produce quickly. So unfortunately, his hourglass ran out of time. Chad Brinker was kind of promoted, a guy with a business background, MBA. Now he's the president of football operations. So he's the primary decision maker. He has final say over the roster, but he brought in a couple of seemingly pretty talented guys to help him out with building this roster out. Mike Borgonzi is the new GM coming over from Kansas City, and Dave Ziegler is the assistant general manager, having been previously a general manager with the Raiders. So those 3 guys are kind of the going to be the main 3 decision makers in building this roster out. Additionally, John Bones Fossil was signed over, formerly with Dallas. He'll be a special teams coordinator. He has a long history of being effective in that role, and the Titans really struggled there last year with Colt Anderson in that position. So I think that alone could win them a couple games. It'll be interesting to see what they can do to get better on the third phase of the game. Moving on to the roster needs and free agent fits. Like we said, Will Levis is probably at best going to be maybe a backup quarterback for you. I think he still has probably some developmental upside, just hasn't been able to put it together just yet. Maybe he'll be a little bit like Bryce Young and be able to ride the bench and get a breather and come back better at some point in the future. But you need a starting quarterback going into 2025. You got to do better there. At wide receiver, you've got Calvin Ridley. He was a big free agent addition last year, had 1,000 yards, but him and who? Tyler Boyd and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine were the next 2 most productive receivers. Neither of them had 500 yards, and they're both free agents. So they badly need really 2 productive receivers to add to that room and go along with Chiga Okonkwo as options in the passing game. On the offensive line, again, they've used first-round picks on J.C. Latham and Peter Skoronski. They look like they're probably going to develop into At least good, competent starters on that left side of the line. But Lloyd Cushenberry was signed at center last year, a big free agent signing. He struggled, and now they need to fix right guard and right tackle as well. So they need two starters on that unit. Maybe you could move Latham to right tackle, but that's probably premature to feel like you need to do that right away. The other fourth position that I think is a big need going into free agency is linebacker, kind of low-key. They signed Kenneth Murray, former first-round pick of the Chargers, to a 2-year deal with pretty substantial, starter money last year. He really struggled, was a bottom 20th percentile PFF grade. They've got some young developmental guys. Jack Gibbons played well until he got hurt. Cedric Gray and James Williams could also develop into starters potentially. They both got some traits that are interesting, but yeah, low-key, this is a questionable group that they've got to do something to kind of stir the pot there. They have $35 million in effective cap space, so $50 million in total cap space, 35 effective. What does that mean? Well, if they signed their draft class and signed everyone else to a league minimum contract, then they would have $35 million in cap space left over. So that's kind of the extra money that they can add on top to lure better free agents than just minimum salary guys. So fits potentially that they might want to look at. If they do want to go with a bridge quarterback, someone like Russell Wilson or Joe Flacco would probably be the best two options on the market in my estimation. Wilson just led the Steelers to the playoffs, and I think Flacco was probably the better quarterback in Indianapolis this year. Probably better than Anthony Richardson. Probably would have given them a better chance to win more games. But I would look at those two guys if you want a bridge quarterback. At wide receiver, for a number 2 receiver, you could look at someone like Palmer from the Chargers or De'Ami Brown from the Commanders. And I think you could also use a slot guy. I think that could help your receiver room out quite a bit as well. Olamide Zaccheaus or Greg Dortch are a couple guys that have had pretty good productivity as slot receivers and would help this team. At offensive tackle, I think ideally you'd like to pick up a right tackle like Morgan Moses would be a good pick there. You could go after a left tackle like Cam Robinson as well. Like I said, you could slide Latham to the right side if you want. And then at guard, you could go after actually a lot of guys. Trey Smith from Kansas City would be kind of the big ticket guy at probably going around $20 million in APY. Then Mekhi Becton would be a lower salary option. I think he played for about $7.5 million in Philly this year. He played pretty well. You might get a little bit of a raise from that, but still cheaper than Trey Smith if you're trying to fill as many needs as possible. Now, at linebacker, Kenneth Murray is due a roster bonus on the 5th day of the league year. So here in about a month and a half, the Titans will have to decide, do they want to go ahead and pay him like $7.5 million for this year, or do they want to take that money and potentially look into someone like Nick Bolton or Zach Bond on the free agent market? There are half a dozen linebackers that I think could start for them. I like Bolton from a value standpoint. I think he brings physicality, leadership, proven production over multiple seasons. So I would prefer to, look heavily into signing him. But Zach Bond's coming off an all-pro season, albeit after not having done as much for the Saints the first few years of his career. Both those guys could work out at linebacker. Some minor needs that you'd like to, if you can find the money in the budget. A number 3 edge would be nice to complement Harold Landry and Arden Key. There are a lot of former first-round guys like Joe Tryon-Shoyinka and Caleb Chason, Cleveland for all. At interior defensive line, Sebastian Joseph-Day is a free agent. So is James Lynch. There are other guys on the market like Taquan Graham or Bobby Brown from the Rams. Yeah, a lot of relatively inexpensive interior D linemen that could help them out against the run. If they want someone maybe with a little bit of pass rushing juice, Levi Onwuzurike or Osa Idigizua would comprise, the all unpronounceable team. But both those guys could help out with the interior pass rush maybe. I think they should stand pat at running back, tight end, and DB. I like what they have there for now. Maybe they could add late in the draft, but Let's take a look at the draft strategies that they may want to pursue this year. So Chad Brinker has already said a few things. Not that he's necessarily tipping his hand all the way, but it's interesting to listen and see. He said that they won't pass on a generational talent. If they see one on the board, they want to draft and develop. That does take patience on ownership's part, so hopefully they will, cooperate and let them build out the team in their vision. And they want 30 picks over the next 3 years, with 10 of them coming in the top 100. So that indicates a willingness to probably trade down, maybe trade some veterans if you have people that other teams want to trade for. I'm going to say, as far as draft strategy, maybe can we stop drafting for need a little bit? Just looking back at their last 5 years, they have struggled to find players, particularly in the first round, that have performed up to their draft pedigree. So this is looking at the year, the position, name, pick, and how did they perform in Pro Football Reference's weighted approximate value. So this is just an attempt to kind of rank approximately the value of players compared to others in the draft class. So we see Isaiah Wilson basically got no value. He played 5 snaps for the team. Caleb Farley was tied for 168th. Traylon Burks was tied for 119th. He struggled with injury. Both those guys have struggled with injuries. Skoronski and Latham, have played better and played more like a first-round caliber player so far. But obviously it's young for all the guys in that draft class. Too soon to say for sure how things are going to shake out there. My point is, maybe let's be open-minded to not just trying to fill our needs all the time in the draft. Let's fill our needs in free agency and try to take the best players available in the draft. Be willing to see this thing through for 2 or 3 years while we build it out. Maybe we get our quarterback in the mid-rounds. Maybe we get him next year. Maybe we get him as a free agent or trade for him. Who knows? But if we don't think a quarterback is worth the first pick, we don't have to take one. I know people will disagree with me, but it's true. So, again, going over the options at the first pick, they could take a quarterback like Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. They could take a non-QB, hopefully a generational talent. Don't know if there is one in the draft. Maybe it's Travis Hunter. Maybe it's Abdul Carter. Maybe it's Mason Graham, or maybe it's Tet McMillan. They've got to decide. Trade down if possible. The ideal situation would be to trade down to number 3, watch 2 quarterbacks go off the board, and then have your pick of, the player that you really think is the best player in the draft. And that would get you more picks to be able to plug more holes. In the second round, I put 3 options, but really I would look at the offensive line there. I think you can afford to get one guy in free agency and get one guy here at number 35. So looking at the consensus board right now, subject to change, but from 26 to 41, there are 7 offensive linemen on the consensus big board in a span of like 16 picks. So that's almost a 50% density. What I'm saying is there's going to be guys available at 35 that you can plug and play, I believe, day one. Probably multiple guys, which could enable you to trade back more. I think they should go offensive line with this pick. You could look at a wide receiver like Golden or Harris. You could look at a linebacker like Campbell. These are good players. It's just that if you don't like these guys or they aren't available with this pick, there aren't a lot of other linebackers or other wide receivers. There's a handful of other offensive linemen that you could justifiably probably take at this spot. So, I would look offensive line in the second round. Again, it's still early in this process. The free agent dominoes will fall. The combine will happen. All these things will determine the draft strategy. But with that being said, I wanted to kind of get my ideas and predictions here. I really think, based on what they said so far, it sounds like they're strongly considering going with a bridge quarterback. I think that they would want to add some receiving talent and offensive line help, build a framework for that player to be successful through the free agent market. On defense, I do think they have some depth pieces to work on, re-signing Sebastian Joseph Day, signing one of those number 3 edges, maybe Joseph Osai or Joe Tryon Shoyinka, one of those guys I mentioned earlier would work. And then I think they need to go after another starting linebacker, making Kenneth Murray, unfortunately, probably a cap casualty and taking your chances with someone else. Their defensive front played well last year, and the fact that their run defense struggled, I just think that means that they need to look elsewhere at linebacker. So, and then again, if they can trade back to number 3, it takes 2 to tango always when you're trying to trade. but really see if you can trade back to 3. Look at trading back at all points and draft best player available, and really just try to get star talent on this roster. Address the offensive line in round 2, and that's pretty much it. So I would love to know your thoughts. What do you think the Titans should do? Let me know in the comments. What would be the perfect draft pick for them, or the perfect free agent pickup in your opinion? It's a pivotal offseason, and with the right moves, they can definitely lay the groundwork for a brighter future. But there are a lot of holes to fill and little margin for error. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and tune in tomorrow as we will dive into the Cleveland Browns offseason plans. You know that'll be an interesting one. Until next time, I'm Ben Jackson, and thanks for listening to 32 Teams in 32 Days. I'm out.